The first gaming console I ever remember playing was Sony's original PlayStation. From Crash Bandicoot, Tomb Raider, Tarzan, to the Spice Girls video game, my sister and I would spend hours playing these games together, and these memories are what solidified my love for the PlayStation consoles. From the PlayStation 1 to 2 PS2s, yes, I played so much that I ran my first poor PS2 into the ground, to the PS3 and the PS4, I've always tried to keep up with Sony's newest console. Don't even get me started on the struggle of trying to get a PlayStation 5. I'm still working on that one, okay? But out of all the console releases, the two that I never paid much attention to were the PlayStation Portable and the PlayStation Vita. To be completely honest, I think my lack of interest in these gaming platforms was simply because all the handheld games I wanted at the time were all accessible on my Nintendo DS. But that all changed when I learned about the PS Vita's treasure trove of visual novels, specifically OTOME games. Granted, the North American store holds no candle to the vast library of games that are available on the Japanese network, but at the height of the PS Vita's life, they released a good amount of OTOME games, some of which would later be ported to the Nintendo Switch, such as Color Malice and Code Realize. It was in 2019 that I finally decided to cave and purchase a Vita, despite my bank account screaming at me in protest, so that I could see what hidden gems were lost to time on this system. And that is what brings us to today's review of Norn9 VAR Commons. Norn9 VAR Commons, which going forward I'll refer to it simply as Norn9, was originally released in Japan on the PSP in 2013, only to be later released on the Vita the following year, and in 2015 it made its debut in North America on the Vita. After acquiring my own Vita, I began my hunt through the PlayStation Store, and Norn9 was one of the top titles that kept constantly being recommended to me. From the sci-fi premise, to the big names contributing to the art and music composition, to even an advertised minigame included. It seemed like quite a unique concept for an OTOME game, and with its relatively short prologue, I found myself absorbed in the story almost instantaneously. Norn9's story begins in modern-day Japan, following Sorata, an extremely intelligent 12-year-old who's on a school field trip one day when he suddenly finds himself transported back in time to the Taisho era. Trying to get his bearings, he encounters a bubbly yet quirky girl who offers to bring him to a ship that'll take them far away. As Sorata has no idea what is going on, and is presuming that he's just dreaming all of this up, he humors the girl and she leads him on board a giant spherical aircraft where he's met with multiple other teens and young adults who describe themselves as espers, those who have special abilities such as creating barriers, telekinesis, and controlling plant life. They go on to explain that they have all been gathered on this aircraft by an organization known as the World, who intervene in the affairs of any and all other countries to alleviate any internal conflict. In simple terms, the organization's main duty is to ensure world peace. The representative of the World tells Sorata that it would be best for him to accompany them to their end destination to help him find a way back home. And Sorata, still in his "I'm having the craziest dream of my life" state, says, "Yeah, okay. I mean, what else is this poor boy going to do? Take a flying leap off this giant floating Pokeball in the sky? Yeah, I think not." In the prologue, we're introduced to all the residents on board the ship, along with some potential antagonists, and then we're set up with the heroine selection. Now this is where the game already deviates from all the other OTOMEs I've ever played before, because the prologue doesn't follow our female protagonist. Everything in the prologue is portrayed in the eyes of Sorata, the young schoolboy. So where does the female protagonist come in? Well, this is where it gets really interesting, because once you complete the prologue, you'll then get to decide which of the 3 female espers on board the ship that you'd like to play as. Yes, not 1 female protagonist, 3. Each female has 3 character love interests that you can select from, which leads to a whopping total of 9 love interests. And with that, let's get into these characters. Starting with the girl that Sorata first meets in the Taisho era, Koharu. Koharu is a very bright, bubbly girl, but is quite out of tune with the rest of society, as she grew up isolated from others, only learning the basics from someone she refers to as the Traveler. In fact, she's been isolated for so long that she can't even recall her own name during most of the prologue. Koharu hides her powers from the other espers on board the ship, as she believes that her abilities will lead only to destruction, and in fear that the other espers will distance themselves from her. Her love interests are Kakeru, Senri, and Masamune. Kakeru is one of the first espers you're introduced to in the game. He's a natural-born leader, trying to bring the members together. But don't be fooled by his kind nature. This man has a sadistic side to him as well, with poor Senri being his main victim to most of his schemes. Senri is the resident recluse on board the ship. He's very quiet and soft-spoken, and although the other members on board try to socialize with him, he feels no inclination to interact with others. He tends to be quite pessimistic, and you can almost always find him holed up in his bedroom. Masamune is one of the eldest and is the representative for the world. He gives reports to the world and relays messages to the other espers. He gives off an older brother vibe, and it seems that he's always looking after the other members on board, whether it's giving a hand completing tasks or breaking up a fight between residents. Our second female protagonist is the youngest of the three heroines, Nanami. She comes from a long line of shinobi and is known for being a talented ninja. Like Koharu, Nanami finds her ability to be more of a burden than a blessing, and you can really see her internal struggle throughout each of her routes. Her love interests are Heishi, Akito, and Ron. Heishi is the most happy-go-lucky guy out of the bunch. With his telekinesis powers, he can easily detect emotions from others, and you can bet that if anyone's in a foul mood, he'll be there to lighten the atmosphere, whether it be from his bad jokes or dragging you to his room for a game of cards. The second love interest for Nanami is Akito. Initially, he comes across as a very gruff, hot-tempered man, but secretly, he's a big softie with a caring heart. From the very beginning of the game, he's cold and abrupt with Nanami, and it's clear that they've known each other since before they boarded the ship. As to why, that's for you to uncover during his route. Next is Ron. And Ron is, well, Ron. Honestly, I have no words to describe this wild card of a character. First of all, he rocks up in attire that makes him look like he's working at a magic nightclub, and the theme for that night is The Matrix. He seems to be quite forgetful, barely remembering anyone's name on the ship, and spends most of his days avoiding his chores and taking plenty of naps. Our third and final heroine is the headstrong eldest, Mikoto. Unlike Koharu and Nanami, she doesn't hide her powers from the other espers, which is the ability to create barriers for protection. She feels a strong sense of duty and is always ensuring the safety of the other residents by keeping a constant barrier activated around the airship, despite it taking a physical toll on her. Her love interests are Sakuya, Itsuki, and Natsuhiko. Sakuya is Mikoto's childhood friend, and you can tell from the get-go that these two have a very close relationship. Sakuya is always looking out for Mikoto, despite her protesting that she can take care of herself. He's very polite and kind, and the other residents on board the ship describe him as being the perfect gentleman. Itsuki is the second love interest for Mikoto, and he is the resident playboy of the ship. Growing up in the red light district, this man knows how to smooth talk his way with women. Although his constant flirting tends to get on the nerves of the women on board, he's actually very kind, and is shown looking out for the other residents during multiple different routes. The last love interest is Natsuhiko. Now this is the only love interest that is not actually a resident of the airship, and during his first encounter with Mikoto, he's labeled as one of the antagonists of the game. Although it's unclear to us at first as to why he's made an appearance on the ship, what we can tell through his actions and words is that nothing and no one will stop him from pursuing his goal, even if it may cause harm in the process. Finally, once you complete each suitor's route, you'll again step into the shoes of Sorata to play the epilogue. During each suitor's route, you're fed little tidbits of information that all come together during the epilogue, and I thought that it created a nice conclusion to the game. The fact that this game has so many love interests is an impressive feat. I mean, it would be very boring if you could only romance 3 characters in total, especially with having 3 heroines. However, because of the vast amount of suitors, this begins to lead into a couple of gripes I had with this game. Firstly, with the length of the routes. Because there's so many characters, you can tell that these routes are far shorter than other otomes, such as Cupid Parasite or Olympia Soiree. While those titles took me around 5 to 6 hours to complete each route, in Norn9, each route was roughly only about 3 to 4 hours, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but that segues into my next couple of points. Because the routes are so short, the plot builds up very quickly, and in some routes, the romance aspects appear very abruptly and seemingly out of nowhere at times. There's no build-up, no warning, they're just friends one minute, and the next they're professing their love for one another. Granted, some characters have genuine backstories that make sense for their relationship with the heroine, but that can only apply to a couple of characters, not the whole Brady Bunch we've got going on in this game. Whether this will bug other players is entirely subjective, but for me, personally, there has to be a realistic build-up in the relationships for me to be invested. You can't show me two characters arguing that they'll never see eye to eye one minute, to then proclaiming that they'd walk the ends of the earth for one another the next. It just doesn't make sense! Another thing to note with the length of the routes is that, despite there being 9 routes, they all still have the same overarching plot, which can get undeniably repetitive at times. There are scenes in this game that occur in every single route, and these scenarios are almost identical. The only difference is which heroine you're playing as and who your love interest is at the time. Now the game actually offers a solution to this by giving you the option to skip the scene if you'd like. During that scene, it'll let you know that you've already played that particular scenario, and while there may be a few different lines per character, the plot will stay the same. You may choose to skip the scene or play it again if you'd like to see the differences. For my first 3 playthroughs, I chose to play them again, but in all honesty, I barely noticed a difference. Personally, I'd say you'd be fine skipping those repetitive scenes after you've played it once, but again, it all depends on the player's preference, and I did appreciate that this game at least gave you that option at all. Now I do have to give the game credit for the character selections. I absolutely love that there are 3 main heroines, all with vastly different personalities, and despite the overall plot staying consistent, I do think that the game found a good middle ground trying to make each route as different as possible. It was also really nice to see the perspective of each heroine during the same conflicts, to see how they were handling each scenario differently. As for the love interests, all 9 of them have very different personalities, and the variety in these men was definitely a plus. But in saying that, because there's so many love interests, you're bound to find some men that you like and some that you don't. I would say out of the 9 suitors, there were 4 that I loved and were fully invested in their routes, 2 that I enjoyed playing, and 3 that didn't appeal to me at all. And while that may not bother some players, for me, as someone who likes to 100% a game, I found it to be a chore at times to push myself through some of these routes. This is why I feel like Norn9 is a double-edged sword when it comes to the plot. The routes are short and sweet, but the plot develops a little too quickly. There are many routes, but the plot can feel repetitive at times. There's plenty of suitors to choose from, but not every suitor will appeal to you. Whether this will bother the player entirely depends on their playing preferences. And while I say that these factors did bother me a little bit, I still had a really fun time playing this game. There's definitely a few routes that I know I'll be playing again, and I don't want you guys to take what I'm saying as me being like, "Aw, this game's rubbish," because it certainly isn't. Now here comes my obligatory segment on seiyus, but the voice cast in this game is phenomenal. As you may have noticed during my character descriptions, not only are the suitors fully voiced, but so are the heroines. Any otome that has voiced heroines immediately gets a 1-up in my book, because they can convey so much more emotion in the character than just me reading their text lines alone, and these voice actors portrayed their character perfectly. There are plenty of voice actors that I'm familiar with from previous otomes I've played, but there were some new voices that I've never heard in visual novels before, such as Noriaki Sugiyama and Daisuke Ono. I've known Sugiyama as Sasuke from Naruto, and Daisuke Ono as Erwin from Attack on Titan, but dear lord, I need to hear more of these men in otome games. I absolutely loved their voices, especially Ono's as Natsuhiko, and I would love nothing more than to hear him in more otome titles. As for the music, I'm not joking when I say it's one of the best soundtracks that I've ever heard in an otome game. The background music was composed by Kevin Penkin, who later went on to create music for popular anime titles such as Made in Abyss and Tower of God. Coincidentally, I recently watched a Trash Taste podcast where Penkin was the guest for that episode, and he spoke a little bit about composing for Norn9. I'll leave a link to the episode if you guys would like to check it out, because it was actually really neat hearing how Norn9 was one of his first ventures into creating music for Japanese anime and games. Not only Kevin Penkin, but the renowned Nobuo Uematsu, who is most famously known for his contributions to the Final Fantasy series, took part in the music for Norn9. So this game is highly regarded for its popular contributors. From its little slice-of-life songs to the ambient battle tracks, it's an absolute pleasure to the ears, and I highly recommend checking out the soundtrack for this game. You may be familiar with the artwork, as it is created by the same artist who worked on the popular OTOME titles such as Nightshade and Charade Maniacs, the latter game currently being a Japan-only release. But the artwork is very visually appealing, in both the backgrounds and character designs. Now, who are my favorite characters? Well, for the three main heroines, I would say that my favorite has to be Mikoto. I loved her headstrong personality, and although I did find her stubbornness to be frustrating at times, I do understand why the way she behaves, and I feel that she had some of the best character development throughout each of her routes. As for the suitors, if I had to pick one for each character, I would say for Koharu, I would choose Masamune. For Nanami, I would choose Heishi, and for Mikoto, I would choose Natsuhiko. However, if I had to pick my favorite overall suitor, it would have to 100% be Itsuki. I'm an absolute sucker for a gorgeous himbo, and Itsuki fits the bill in every regard. As for whether there is a recommended route order, the game actually tells you right at the beginning which routes they recommend playing first. The game recommends playing Senri, Kakeru, Heishi, and Sakuya first to get an overall feel for the world and the plot. And this is immediately where I goofed up and ruined it for myself. You see, me and my small brain read this and thought it meant that once you played the recommended suitor for that heroine, you can then play the other suitors for that specific heroine. So my first route was Heishi, then I moved on to Akito, and I immediately spoiled it for myself with a pretty integral plot point. So please don't be like me and make sure you play Senri, Kakeru, Heishi, and Sakuya first. I don't believe it necessarily matters which order you play the first four, but I highly recommend that you play those four characters first before you move on to any other suitor. Don't be like me. Be smart, okay? Along with the recommended routes, there is one suitor that will be locked with every heroine, which will open after you complete the good ending of at least one of the suitors with that respective heroine. But I highly recommend playing those three locked routes last for the best story progression. Finally, once you unlock each suitor's route, you'll earn points which you can use in the Norn9 store to unlock comics, side stories, and extra illustrations. There's also a retro minigame that'll help you earn more points to spend in the store, but there's really not much gameplay involved. You will choose a character from the game, and they'll have a battle with 3 opponents. The outcome is entirely based on chance, so there's no real tactic in playing the minigame, but it is a cute way to earn more points. Now, while I was writing this review, I had originally made a whole spiel about, man, I really enjoyed this game, and I wish others could play it without having to spend hundreds on buying a PS Vita. And serendipitously, the stars have aligned, and Axis answered my prayers by announcing the Nintendo Switch port of not only Far Commons, but the fandisc Last Era. So fans will be getting a double dose of Norn9, with the tentative release date of 2023. Whether this port will include the minigame and the points-based store is a mystery to me, but I'm interested in seeing what changes will be made to the Switch version. And will I get my hands on a copy, despite me already owning the Vita version? Probably. Hey, I'm a simple woman. I see OTOME, I buy OTOME. Now, if you're really impatient and can't wait to see what this game has to offer, you could watch the Norn9 anime. Yes, this is one of the few OTOME to actually get an anime release. Caller Malice, I'm still waiting for you. The anime does give you a pretty good view of the world, but it does feel very rushed at times, and it also covers a lot of plot points that are integral in the video game. The show mainly covers Kakeru, Akito, and a little bit of Sakuya's and Natsuhiko's routes, so if you want a completely spoiler-free experience, then I urge you to hold out for the video game's release. Can I just take a little moment to rant to you guys though? Why are we always done so dirty when it comes to anime releases of Otome games? Like, I completely understand that the budget for the anime must be significantly lower than that of the video games, but oh, what is with this animation? Look! Heishi doesn't even look like the same man! I'm not asking for a Jujutsu Kaisen level of production. I'm just asking for Natsuhiko to have more facial expression than a potato. That's all. What I will say though is that Itsuki and Heishi are comedic gold. They single-handedly carried most of this anime for me and were one of the main reasons I stuck to the end of this show. All in all, if I had to give this game a rating, I would give it a 7.5 out of 10. Although I did find it repetitive at times, and a few routes felt rushed, I still had a great time with Norn9, and the pros most definitely outweigh the cons. Do I recommend this game? Absolutely. With its distinctive storytelling from the multiple main characters to the multitude of love interests, Norn9 is one of the most unique otomes that I've ever played, and I'm confident that many others will enjoy what this game has to offer. So I hope this review helped you decide whether or not to pick up this game. If you've already played this game, I would love to hear who was your favorite suitor and who was your favorite heroine. There are so many to choose from, and I would love to hear your opinions on this game. If you have any questions at all, please leave them in the comments below, and I'll answer them as soon as I can. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful week, you're staying safe, and I will talk to you all very soon.